Just read a report in the Daily Telegraph about an American football star who was pulled over by police in Florida. He's black, and it's not surprisingly ignited the old debate about black men and the police. Um, I watched the police body cam footage that has just been released. This came after they didn't release it immediately. They probably should have, but this came after he made a press conference about how he was treated. And at the game itself, like I say, he's a football player. At the game himself, he sort of imitated what happened to him, which is a strange thing to do. Felt like he was trivializing the situation. He imitated it with another player at the game. So I'm just going to read out the report from the Daily Telegraph and share my thoughts on this because I think one of those cases that people will jump to conclusions without knowing the full story. And the optics are, oh, black man, uh, police brutality, etc. But I would implore people to watch the body cam footage. There is a bit more to this. Now, I personally think both parties don't come out particularly well, and I'll talk about what I'm referring to with that. So, this is the report. A Miami Dolphins star was dragged to the ground by police just hours before the NFL team's season opener. Tyreek Hill, 30, ranked the fastest player in the league, was on his way to play in the in the home game against the Jacksonville Jaguars in Hard Rock Stadium on Sunday when he was pulled over by traffic police for speeding and reckless driving. That is the context of why they pulled him over. Um, Reckless driving is not a small thing; it can kill people. The video released by Miami police shows an officer asking the $30 million a year wide receiver why he did not have a seatbelt on before telling him to roll down his window. After a brief exchange, Hill rolls his window up, prompting a second officer to open the car door and pull him out. The player, who is nicknamed Cheetah due to his explosive speed, is seen being forced to the ground face down as an officer puts him in handcuffs with a knee pressed against his back. Take me to jail, brother. Do what you have to do, the NFL star can be heard saying. A policeman replies that they will before telling Hill to stop crying, as the player tells a nearby friend to call Drew, presumably his agent, Drew Rosenhaus. As the 30-year-old lies face down, an officer tells him, when we tell you to do something, you do it. You understand? Not what you want, not what we tell you. You're a little effing confused. The police officers then lead the NFL star to a nearby pavement where they order him to sit down. Hill resists, telling the officers he has just had knee surgery. It prompts another officer to rush over and force Hill down. The NFL star responds by telling the officers to chill. Eventually, Hill was released and made it to the game. Despite the drama of his journey, he helped the Dolphins to victory, scoring a touchdown, which he celebrated by mimicking an arrest by placing his hands behind his back. Hill later told CNN he was shocked by what happened. In a statement, the Miami Dolphins described the officer's actions as maddening. Well, I honestly, I've watched the body cam footage, and I think both parties are somewhat at fault. I think that it's pretty clear he was not complying from the start. Now, when the officer went to his window, he immediately wound it up. So, in that situation, when there's a blacked out window, the officer can't see what someone's doing. The officer doesn't know if they have a gun. That could be a situation that escalates quickly and puts officers in danger. Um, so that's clearly not complying with reasonable requests. They were asking him why he wasn't wearing a seatbelt. And the context of this was he was speeding. He was driving recklessly. Um, I think the fact that the Miami Dolphins immediately defend him without considering the situation reeks of entitlement. I mean, it seems the optics of this is this guy thinks because he's a sports star, he can just do as he pleases. And in the press conference, he was saying, I wasn't brought up to use bad language and so on. And what if I was not Tyreek Hill? Well, he's saying, oh, if I was a regular black guy, they would have beaten me up. That's what he's implying. But by the same token, he seems to think that because he's going to a football game, he can speed and drive recklessly. Now, having said that, I do think the officers were hot-headed from the start. They were clearly angry. They were clearly quite trigger happy. Is the wrong word, but no gunshots were fired. but they immediately threw him to the ground quite roughly. The thing about his knee, I don't know if that's true or not. Some have said that's dubious since he's on his way to a football match, but American football we're talking about here. I don't know. I just think it's one of these situations where you have someone who's not complying and therefore escalating the situation. All he had to do was wind down his window and talk to the officers. He claims his father or his uncle told him to keep his hands on the wheel and keep talking, but he wasn't doing that. So he's contradicting himself. He wound up the window. How can the officers talk to him if he's winding up his window? Some of his friends, or I don't know if they were other players or what, they're sort of getting involved, and then an officer's very angrily telling them to go away. I do think the officers came across as hot headed. They didn't seem very calm and professional. They seemed hot headed. But I don't think Hill is as innocent as he's making out. Why didn't he just comply? Why didn't he just wind down the window? Because this is going to be one of those things, the left will immediately say it's racism. He's a black guy. It must be racist cops. I saw a number of people saying they were Cubans. There's of course a lot of Cubans in Florida, and they tend to be pretty right wing. But it's there will be people trying to racialize this and say it's because he's black. Maybe it's because he wasn't complying. I mean, I think a white football star who wound up his window would probably get the same treatment. So the left in the United States have to stop treating every single altercation between a black man and the police as oh, it must be racism. Um, I'm not saying that the police were entirely right here. I do think they were hot-headed, but I think people are immediately jumping to conclusions without realizing the context of this. He was speeding. He was driving recklessly. Being a football player doesn't give you a license to do that, to break traffic laws and put lives at risk. Actually, reckless driving can cost lives, so it's not a small thing. So I don't think this thing will escalate, but I'm just citing this as an example of how these sort of things, looked at from different angles, can be perceived in different ways. I do think that some American police are definitely out of control. I do think that there is a problem in America with police brutality. I do think some officers think that they're God and think they can do what they want. In this case, the local union has defended the officers, although one of them's been put on administrative leave. I think they were a bit hot headed, but I don't blame them for reacting strongly when he wound his window up because they don't know what's going on. They don't know if he's taking a weapon out or what. They can't see what's happening. So he escalated it by not complying. It's really not rocket science, just comply. Um, and as for the officers, they should have calmed down a bit. I think they were hot headed. That was unprofessional. Um, so yeah, I think it's a useful example. I'm going to put a link to the body cam footage now. This thing didn't. It's probably going to die away as a story because he wasn't seriously injured. This wasn't like a police brutality case per se. But had something escalated, then this would be an even bigger story. So I'm just putting it out there to point out, like, with so many of these cases, you look at from different angles, you get different perspectives. And I think too many people, there's sort of two components. There's the American left and, frankly, the likes of Black Lives Matter that will immediately say it must be racism without considering what the suspect is actually, the situation that has arisen to that. But then there is also conservatives who will kind of go along with this idea that police can have the power of gods. Now, I do think those officers were a bit hot-headed. I don't think that was professional, because they're escalating it by being hot-headed in that way. Um, and you could just tell by the way they were talking to his friends. But I wouldn't entirely penalise him on this occasion because he wasn't complying. And actually, he was released after a while, so he wasn't even detained for a long time. Um, but it is exactly a good example of something that you need to look at from all perspectives. I personally think both parties, I think he was to blame initially for not complying, but I do think the officers were a bit heavy-handed, in terms of the fact they were clearly hot-headed, and I'm not sure if it was necessary to throw him to the ground. Maybe it was. Maybe that's a procedure when they don't know if he's armed or not, but they could have frisked him. Um, they did then bring him up afterwards. But it would be wrong if every single altercation in America was viewed through the prism of George Floyd. Um, and I would also say I think it's wrong for the Miami Dolphins to just have this knee-jerk defense of the guy because he's one of theirs without considering the full situation. Being a sports star doesn't give him a right to break the laws. It just doesn't. I think that's extremely entitled. So let me know your thoughts, particularly if you're in Florida. I imagine this is a big story in Florida, so let me know your thoughts on that. I just think he should have complied. He should have wound the window down, but the officers maybe need to calm down a bit. I don't think it was necessary. I think they were hot-headed, um, and that's never good in policing.